Oh, horrible man. I begged the courts to let me go home, where I could be protected by them.
These are some of the most disturbing and gut-wrenching POV clips ever caught on camera. I've personally searched through countless videos to try and bring you only the most intense and unfiltered moments. Some of these are so extreme that they've been wiped from the internet, so as always, viewer discretion is highly advised. Level 1. Man discovers lost GoPro. In July 2019, YouTuber Rich Aloha was scuba diving in Foster Falls State Park, Tennessee, when he made a shocking discovery. He had been hunting for treasure but found nothing more than a GoPro camera buried in the mud at the bottom of a lake near a waterfall. It turned out that the GoPro belonged to Richard Ragland, a 22-year-old man who had tragically drowned at the same location 2 years earlier in 2017. He was spending the day with friends, swimming near the waterfall when he went underwater and never came back up, just days before his 23rd birthday. But what made this discovery so incredible was that the SD card inside the camera was still intact and functional despite being submerged for a full 2 years. When he checked it, Rich discovered that the footage on the card captured Ragland's final moments, showing him smiling, swimming, and enjoying his day with friends. At the time, Rich had no idea who the man on the tape was, but he soon remembered that he had been told all about Ragland's death by park rangers. This was likely the young man's lost camera. Determined to do the right thing, Aloha spent hours researching online to find a way to contact Ragland's family. Eventually, Aloha succeeded in reaching out to Ragland's parents, Robin and Gary McCreer, who were overwhelmed by the news. They had previously been sent a thumb drive by park rangers containing some of the final footage of their son, but it had apparently been stolen in transit, meaning they never got any closure on his death. Aloha eventually met with the McCreers to return the GoPro and its contents, making for an emotional moment. The family was grateful for the opportunity to see their son living life to the fullest in his final hours. Robin McCreer expressed her appreciation for Aloha's efforts, saying that his persistence in contacting them means the world to us. Aloha, who considered his diving adventures a form of ministry, felt that he was divinely led to this discovery. He described the experience as indescribable, and stated that he doesn't think there's ever been a more impactful find. Exploration of the Bohemian Grove. YouTuber Dancer1 conducted a daring investigation into the secretive Bohemian Grove, a private 2,700-acre campground in Monte Rio, California, owned by the elite Bohemian Club. Well, at least that's what we know to be true. For years, the Bohemian Grove has been the focus of conspiracy theories due to its highly exclusive nature and elite membership. Very few people are allowed to join, and those that do are rarely ever heard from again. That tight-knit secrecy has led to a host of claims of satanic rituals and allegations of youth abuse, which have surrounded the club for as long as it existed. But Dancer1 wanted to know for sure. He waited until the off-season when it was colder and fewer members would be visiting the campground. Using a kayak, he carefully crossed the Russian River and entered the property undetected. After navigating the dense trees and the uneven, steep terrain, he eventually reached the heart of the campground, only to find it was far, far more unsettling than even he expected. Right before him, he saw the infamous 40-foot owl statue, which serves as the centerpiece for the club's annual cremation of care ritual, a slightly unsettling annual tradition that nobody gets to see. But the further into the grounds he got, the more and more surveillance Dancer1 saw. video cameras and security guards everywhere, and that was just what he could see. There could be motion-activated sensors anywhere, and the consequences of breaking into the world's most secure cult could be deadly. So he left. But Answer One's investigation didn't stop with this initial foray. He claimed to have returned to Bohemian Grove multiple times, including during the annual July encampment when the cremation of care ritual takes place. He says that he even witnessed part of the ritual, describing the sight of a person covered in cloth being carried and placed in a boat, suggesting a mock sacrifice of some kind. But the truth is that nobody has any idea what takes place in Bohemian Grove behind closed doors. And Answer One's investigation suggests we don't want to. Level 2. Westinghouse Electricity Factory. In the heart of Cleveland, Ohio, stood the once mighty Westinghouse Electric Factory, a testament to America's industrial prowess. This colossal facility, which had churned out everything from metal casings to lighting equipment, was once among the largest factories in the United States. But in 1979, the production lines fell silent and the factory doors closed for good, leaving behind a giant shell of its former glory. Chris Hill, also known as Urbex Hill, set his sights on uncovering the secrets that lay within the abandoned walls of the factory. He wanted to discover the remnants from the factory's heyday, frozen in time for over 4 decades. But before he even got into the building, Chris got an ominous sign. The sound of gunfire, a shootout not far from their location.
Yeah, somebody's shooting. Damn. That's Cleveland. Wow. That's crazy. It's not even that far away from here. Oh shit, that sounds like a shootout.
But it wasn't enough to stop him. He wanted to see inside the factory. The factory itself was nothing special, just an abandoned building left to decay. But when they went into the basement, everything got much more real. The place looked like a war zone, dripping with water and broken down. That's when the noises began.
Okay, I'm hearing something. Maybe it's an animal. I'm sure this animal's down here.
Strange noises echoed through the basement, which Urbex Hill assumed, or hoped, was some kind of an animal, like a stray dog. Of course, if they did encounter a stray dog in this basement, escaping would be a serious challenge. But as if all of this wasn't intense enough, Urbex's lights started to switch off right as those unsettling noises began again. It was horrible timing, but the bizarre and unknown noise just made them want to venture deeper and find out what it was. They found a strange man crouched in the corner, shirtless and staring at the wall, not moving. He was clearly homeless, possibly high on some kind of drug, but suddenly the noises made sense. It turns out that the basement was home to a homeless encampment, a large-scale resting place for people who have nowhere else to turn. But that was enough to make Urbex say it was time to leave, if they could still find the exit. Dog's GoPro captures strange sounds in Michigan forest. A man and his dog were hiking through the Huron National Forest in Michigan. The man had fixed a GoPro to the dog, hoping to get some cool and unique footage from his pup's POV. The man had a history of hunting for Bigfoot, always hoping that he would one day get the legendary creature on camera. So far, he had been unsuccessful. But the man never once gave up hope. This could be the day. But he couldn't have anticipated he would get something far, far stranger. As the dog fished around the forest looking for something fun and interesting to play with, a bizarre sound rang out across the woodland. A strange shriek, inhuman and frankly unsettling.
I don't know what the hell that is over there. Alright, get away from there.
It sounded nothing like any other known animal sound in the world, something more demonic and screechy. The dog heard it right away, and the man soon heard it afterwards, but he had no clue what the animal could possibly have been. The noise just got louder and louder, and more intense to boot. As the dog started going toward it, the man decided that they had to leave. It was too dangerous to go and chase the sound of an animal they had never heard before. When the video was eventually uploaded, the man's followers identified the sound as an Aztec death whistle, a bizarre and sinister old whistle once used by the Aztecs for sacrificial purposes. It emits a sinister, haunting, and frankly terrifying screeching sound, exactly like the one the man and his dog heard. But whether this was all one big prank or something more sinister and intense, we're still not clear on that. Daniel O'Neill's camping encounter. In 2023, Daniel O'Neill, the creator behind the YouTube channel English Woodsman, was making what he thought would be a pretty typical camping video. He had ventured into an area he was not super familiar with, that he had never really visited before, hoping for a totally different kind of video. Daniel had specifically chosen his location to be far from the nearby cows, right in the middle of the woodland for some peace and quiet. But as he set up all of his recording equipment, he started to feel unsettled by something he had heard.
Hello? Hello? You got a bit of that. There's nobody here. I'm going to point down there could just be something behind me here. But it sounded like human footsteps.
While he was walking, he heard a strange noise, what seemed to be human footsteps beside him. But it was all on his own, and if there had been someone walking near him, he would have been aware of it. The overthinking was bothering him. He couldn't spend an entire video obsessing about it, but the noises didn't stop. Not for a second. After his tent was set up and he was inside, he suddenly heard another mysterious sound outside. What seemed to be someone walking past his tent. He dismissed it again, convinced that he was now just hearing what he wanted to hear, but when he played back the recording, he confirmed that the sound was real. Yet, nobody was in the area. By this point, his anxiety was rapidly increasing, noticing more and more bizarre noises outside of his tent. But every time he checked, he saw nobody nearby. And the sounds picked up on the recordings seemed impossible. Dry footsteps, despite the wet, muddy conditions. No matter how much he convinced himself that he was just hearing things or making it up, Daniel kept hearing the noises. He knew he had to find another spot to camp outside of the woods. He later described the noises that he had heard as being animal-like, but impossible to describe in any more specific way. All he knew was that he had to get out of there as quickly as possible. He would never come to know what the noise was. Level 3. Fake cop traffic stop. It was just after midnight on a September night in 2019, and an Albuquerque Police Department officer was driving home when he noticed what seemed to be a traffic officer conducting a stop near 4th Street and I-40. The traffic cop had pulled over an SUV and was in the process of interrogating the driver, but something about it rang strange to the APD officer. For one thing, the traffic stop officer wasn't driving a regulation vehicle, he was driving a civilian car with red and blue flashing lights. For another, he was wearing plain clothes with nothing even remotely police-like other than a strange star-shaped badge on his belt. And the biggest and strangest issue of all, he just happened to look very young. The APD officer decided to approach the traffic cop and get some answers, believing that he would have identification that could clear the whole thing up. The traffic officer introduced himself as Brendan Wazinski, a cop that had worked for the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office for 3 years. He had stopped the SUV for allegedly traveling at 120 miles per hour on the highway, but something was still really off. And the more that he questioned Officer Wazinski, the more that feeling continued to grow. Officer Wazinski couldn't produce proper identification. His birth year, 1994, didn't match the registration of his vehicle, suggesting that wasn't his car. And he wasn't wearing appropriate police attire or equipment. Only at this point did Wazinski admit that he was not and had never been a cop.
Alright. I'm just gonna be straight up honest with you. I'm not a cop.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just gonna be.
Where'd you get that
honest.
badge from?
I bought it offline.
Okay. Do me a favor, stay in here.
Very dangerously quick gush, Skylar had to rush over the slippery rocks to safety. The exact situation the signs had warned him about. He had to stay calm even though they were mere moments away from being completely obliterated. When he finally got to safety, he realized that there was no third siren coming. The entire thing had been a false alarm, possibly triggered to deter him from fishing in the area. The water wasn't rising, nor was it ever going to rise. In his rush to escape the scene, Skylar had injured his leg, another risk that the signs had warned him about. He had a good time fishing while he did, at least. Despite initially dismissing the warnings that had been laid out all over the area, Skylar finally had to admit that he should have listened. He told his viewers to respect the warnings, to be safe, and to not go fishing next to an active dam. Orca encounter. In Norway, a group of tourists climbed on board a big wooden boat heading out into the fjords in hopes of seeing some orcas in the wild. Of course, there was no guarantee that they would be able to see any, but just as the sun was starting to go down, they had some luck. An orca passed by their boat, and then another, and another. Within a matter of minutes, they found themselves in the middle of a massive pod of whales, with dozens and dozens of the orcas surrounding them and passing peacefully. It was an incredible view, but of course, everyone was terrified. The killer whale is one of the biggest animals on the planet, an apex predator that has more than earned its reputation in the world. And while they don't usually tend to attack humans, there have been multiple cases of that happening. In 1972, a surfer in California was bitten on the leg by an orca but survived. In 2005, a 12-year-old boy in Alaska was bumped by an orca while swimming but not injured. And in 2014, a diver in New Zealand was pulled underwater by an orca grabbing his catch bag, but escaped unharmed. All other cases of humans being attacked or killed by orcas have happened in captivity. But that doesn't mean that seeing this many this close is not terrifying. Fortunately for these people, the orcas had no interest in harming them. Hidden basement discovered. A man had recently moved into a studio apartment in England, having agreed to rent it without even seeing it once. The cost of living in the UK had skyrocketed, and all he really wanted was a small, nice space for an affordable amount. But when moving day arrived and he came to see his new home for the first time, he started to realize exactly why the rental price was so low in the first place. The whole vibe of the place was strange. It was a beautiful old building with high ceilings, a 19th century monastery-type design with mirrors everywhere. But the bedroom was so small that he couldn't even stand up. But none of that was anything compared to the strange handle in the floor. He believed that the apartment was built to contain some additional underfloor storage, but when he opened it, he found that it went much, much deeper than he had anticipated. Alone in his home at 10 p.m. with nothing more than a camera and a torch, he ventured down into what he described as the dungeon of the house. The dungeon was covered in graffiti with a bricked-up window, a bizarre trench with a grate that he suspected was a burial ground, and what appeared to be a brick seat or a sacrificial altar. It had all the hallmarks of some kind of ceremonial sacrifice dungeon. But the dungeon was even bigger. The further he got, the more it became clear why the rental price was so low. Anyone who came to see the property would have seen the sacrificial room and fled. The dungeon was wired for electricity, and he could hear the sounds of the neighbors upstairs who most likely have no idea about what is going on right under their own homes. A newspaper left behind was dated 1984, suggesting that the place was in use for a long, long period of time. But what it was used for, we'll never know. And I don't think this guy really wants to know. Creepy satanic bridge. In the summer of 1999, Chris Childrey was producing a report for the George Washington High School art and literary magazine, Wantes, shooting footage of the aptly named Satan's Bridge in Virginia. The footage opened with shots of animal carcasses, some of them as fully intact skeletons, some of them simply remnants shoved into a trash bag and left in a ditch. While there was no way to know for sure, the presence of deer suggested that this was the work of hunters who had no purpose for the animals they had so cruelly murdered. But the more Chris recorded footage, the more convinced he became that this may not have been the work of hunters at all. This may have been people performing ritual sacrifice in the name of Satan. This may seem like a stretch, but when he ventured under the bridge to investigate further, Chris found all the proof that he could have hoped to find. He had found 5 stones arranged in a pentagram formation with sand and ashes in between, a typical formation for occult practices. He discovered a burned piece of paper identified as a religious tract with John 3:16 on it. And next to it all, black candles, typically associated with satanic rituals, were also present in the area. All of the hallmarks of occult practice were present. And while he never filmed them out of respect, Chris had seen multiple dead human bodies around the bridge throughout 1999 and 2000, an unsettling pattern that only further convinced him that Satanists were in action all over Virginia. they were sacrificing living things to appease Satan. Chris eventually stopped visiting the bridge entirely, freaked out by what he had seen over the years, but in the years since his footage, Satan's Bridge has become more of a casual hangout spot for teenagers, with less openly satanic practices taking place, at least that we know of. Level 4. Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford. In the early hours of May 27, 2018, Sophia McKenna and her friend Spencer Mugford embarked on what was supposed to be an adventurous night out to the new London Ledge Lighthouse. Spencer was a student at the University of Connecticut Avery Point campus in Groton, a campus well known for its marine credentials. The two of them took a white and blue 14-foot sunfish sailboat without a mast from the school's marina and began paddling toward the lighthouse, located about a mile offshore. Around 2 a.m., Spencer posted a photo on Snapchat showing Sophia at the lighthouse. This would be the last known communication from either of them. Between 2:05 a.m. and 2:09 a.m., Sophia's mother, Michelle McKenna, received 7 missed calls from Spencer's phone. Unfortunately, she was asleep and didn't see them until later. When neither Sophia nor Spencer were heard from the next day, their families filed missing persons reports. The Coast Guard, along with state and local agencies, launched an extensive search operation covering 2,025 square miles over 71 hours. 2 days after their disappearance, the hull of the boat they had used washed up on a beach in New York, but they were nowhere to be found. On June 8, 2018, a boater made a grim discovery. Spencer's body found floating in the water about 2 miles south of Avery Point. The cause of death was determined to be drowning. Despite extensive searches, Sophia has never been found. At the time of her disappearance, she was 5'9", weighed 130 pounds, and had brown hair and blue eyes. She had several distinctive tattoos, including phrases on her foot and ankle, a crescent moon on her waist, and cherry blossoms with a butterfly on her shoulder. All distinctive, easily recognizable traits. None of them were seen. Investigators theorize that after docking at the lighthouse, the boat may have come loose. Spencer, a strong swimmer, might have attempted to retrieve it, but struggled in the cold, dark waters. Sophia, not being a strong swimmer, may have tried to help him, leading to both of them getting into trouble. The disappearance of Sophia McKenna remains a mystery. Her family continues to hold on to hope that she might still be alive, maintaining a Facebook group called Finding Sophia McKenna to keep her case in the public eye. Missing kids in the woods. In late September 2021, 3 young children aged 2, 6, and 7 went missing in the Sam Houston National Forest near Montgomery County, Texas. The children had taken a commonly used trail connecting their homes, but diverted from the path to play in a dry creek. When they were done, they soon realized they were lost. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office received the initial report of the missing children around 7:55 p.m. on Thursday, but as night fell and rain set in, concerns for the children's safety grew. They had to be found quickly, or they might not be found at all. A large-scale search operation was launched involving law enforcement agencies from several jurisdictions, fire department personnel, Montgomery County Search and Rescue, helicopters, drones, and canine. With a 1.2 million strong following on YouTube and content with over 389 million views, he had made a name for himself by showing off travel videos showcasing the beautiful landscapes of his home, Norway. But Iptor was not just your run-of-the-mill travel content creator. He wasn't interested in only showing the gorgeous landscapes of his homeland. He would film himself performing dangerous, unthinkable stunts, usually involving ice skating on thin ice, diving into icy waters, and drinking vodka in extreme conditions, and his followers loved him for it. One day he posted a video titled, "I am not dead, I am 57 today." It was his 57th birthday, and he was doing basically all the stuff that his fans came to his channel for. He was immersed in what looked like a freezing outdoor bathtub, drinking vodka straight from the bottle. But what the fans didn't know is that this would be the last time he would ever be seen. On November 22, 2021, 𝐂𝐸 was filming a video at Jakobs Dam near the town of Kongsberg, Norway. The video was going to be one of his usual stunts, seeing him skate on frozen lake water. But today, the ice broke and pulled him into the freezing lake water. Witnesses could hear his screams for help from a distance and quickly alerted emergency services. Within a short space of time, divers managed to rescue 𝐂𝐸 from the icy lake, and he was airlifted to Ullevål Hospital in Oslo. Yet, despite the efforts of medical professionals, 𝐂𝐸 succumbed to his injuries on the same day. He had been underwater for too long, and doctors were unable to save him. The news of his death was a massive shock for his fan base, especially given that just days earlier, he had posted the video celebrating his 57th birthday. In his honor, his fans shared messages of how his videos brought joy to them. His partner, Tove Sharvin, shared a heartfelt message on Facebook describing the loss as indescribable and thanking 𝐂𝐸 for the memories they shared. He was no longer alive, but his memory would never die. Pilot crash. It was November 2019, and a student pilot was flying alone in the single-engine Cessna 172. The Cessna had long been described as a friendly plane to fly for a new pilot, but something was going very wrong with this one. On the approach to landing at North Perry Airport in Pembroke Pines, Florida, the pilot was experiencing difficulties. The landing procedure wasn't going as smoothly as it typically did. When the wheels eventually hit the tarmac, the plane immediately veered right off the runway, sliding into a grassy area right next to it. The pilot couldn't seem to stop the plane as it hit and damaged 2 airport signs until the plane eventually came to a powerful stop. Local police and fire rescue teams immediately responded to the scene when the crash was reported, with the sheriff's office coming in to give their guidance too. Miraculously, the student pilot had survived, managing to exit the aircraft without any emergency help required. But he did suffer some injuries in the crash, which was officially deemed by authorities to be minor. As a precautionary measure, emergency services transported the pilot to a local hospital with what were described as non-life-threatening injuries. But as it turns out, this was not the last crash to take place at North Perry Airport. Since this incident in 2019, multiple other planes have crashed at the runway, suggesting a sinister and eerie pattern of misfortune. And not all of them have been so lucky. In 2022, an instructor and a student both died in a plane crash on the runway. In 2023, another student pilot survived a near-fatal crash, escaping with spinal cord injuries. And in 2025, the plane landed on its roof after crashing in a freak accident. Every single incident has been on the same runway, always in broad daylight and in perfect flying conditions. Many have come to believe that the airport has some unique curse on it, seemingly the only explanation for so much misfortune. Level 6. Body stain in an abandoned house. It was 2020, and urban explorer Rhythm Rider was about to delve into his latest exploration target, an old abandoned home that once belonged to a woman who died under mysterious, tragic circumstances. Ryder didn't know how the woman had died, but her house had become a popular spot for urban explorers who were always shocked by the condition within. The second Ryder stepped inside, he understood why. The house was almost completely undisturbed, seeming more like a time capsule to the period where this woman lived than an abandoned home. Of course, there were signs of abandonment, namely the overwhelming presence of squirrels, but otherwise it seemed as though someone had lived here until very, very recently. Ryder explored the entire house from the upper bedrooms to the lower basement, taking in the entire residence and slowly piecing together the story of this woman's life. She was an avid smoker, as seen by the nicotine film. Her husband had died before she did, and she had multiple gun cases throughout the house, suggesting she and her husband were very protective. But what really caught Ryder's eye was the body stain, a human-shaped mark left on the floor beside the original owner's walker. That's when he realized the woman had died right there where he was standing. She likely took some kind of fall and simply never recovered. In fact, she probably lay there for hours or even days before anyone found her. Her belongings had been rifled through, suggesting that someone did eventually come to collect her things. But that body stain messed Ryder up. He had to stop filming for 20 minutes just to process the realization that he was staring at the exact place where a woman lost her life. That's when he started to piece everything together. All of the gun cases were empty, suggesting that someone had come into the home and ransacked them. Maybe that happened after she died, but maybe it happened shortly before. Maybe it was even the reason that she died. Dangerous wires on Rampart Range trails. In July 2017, authorities became aware of an increasingly dangerous trend going on in the trails of Colorado. Wire booby traps had been set up among the forest high enough that a biker going at speed would almost certainly be decapitated. The first wire trap was reported on July 2nd, shortly after the trail opened to motorcycles for the season. An 18-year-old man had been riding his bike through the trail only to get caught on the wire and strongly yanked off the bike. He survived his injuries, suffering only 2 broken ribs. But this video shows the discovery of the second. A local dirt biker just happened to notice the wire before impact and immediately pulled out his camera to capture what was going on. The trails are open to pretty much everybody, including hikers, horses, bicycles, and motorcycles, but it was pretty obvious that the traps were specifically targeting off-road riders. The reason why, nobody has any idea. It's suspected that the culprit would have been someone who opposed motorized vehicles like motorcycles being used in the area, hoping that by threatening their life, it would be enough to end it. Instead, all they did was almost end someone's life to prove their point. As a precautionary measure, the U.S. Forest Service temporarily closed the trail to all users while the investigation continued, but the outrage spread almost immediately. It turns out this is not the only incident in Colorado. For years now, unknown culprits have been doing everything they can to try and dissuade bikers from using the trails. The decapitation wires are only the most recent in a long series of booby traps. Authorities have also been called out to investigate the use of spike strips, used to dangerously pop the tires of the bikes and send the riders careening off the trail, possibly to their deaths. Other incidents have seen holes being dug and barely disguised for the same reason. It's obvious that someone in Colorado wants to put an end to the bikers on the trails, but exactly who those people are remains an open question for law enforcement. 𝐃𝐞𝐞𝐞. It was May 28, 2013, and in Cornwall, England, a 28-year-old photographer named 𝐃𝐞𝐞𝐞 was on his way to see a real-life whirlpool. Jacob was hugely successful for his age, thanks to his daring approach to photography and his love of the ocean. He had captured some of the most incredible, award-winning images in British journalism, all because he was not afraid to risk his life for the shot. That bravery had just won him a 28,000-pound trip to Antarctica. But before he went, he wanted one incredible shot. Jacob had gone to 𝐂𝐚𝐲𝐞𝐞, a notorious area for whirlpools, with his friend David Rain. David was going to film Jacob as he swam inside the whirlpool, an exceptionally dangerous plan, and one that signs all over the pool strongly warned against due to the strong currents. But just to make the footage even more incredible, Jacob insisted he would be wearing a plastic horse's head. When he got into the water, Jacob managed to avoid being pulled down by the current by swimming backward, a trick that allowed him to enjoy the thrill with minimal risk. But he wanted a better shot. He wanted underwater footage. Using a GoPro camera, Jacob dove beneath the surface for one last shot, but he would never resurface. When Jacob didn't come up, David started to panic. He went searching the area, looking into the drainage tunnel in hopes that Jacob had washed up, but he didn't. There was no sign of Jacob anywhere. Then, David spotted him, floating face down in the water at the other end of the pool. Despite immediate efforts to save him, including CPR administered by David and a passerby, Jacob was pronounced dead after being airlifted to the Royal Cornwall Hospital. The coroner's report concluded that Jacob had died from drowning, with trace amounts of ketamine found in his system, though not enough to cause intoxication. Jacob's death was ruled accidental, with the coroner acknowledging him as a competent swimmer but also a calculated risk-taker. His untimely death shocked the community, with his funeral drawing so many mourners that the church reached maximum capacity. A year after Jacob's death, the drainage system in Hale Harbor was altered, eliminating the formation of the whirlpool that had fascinated and ultimately claimed Jacob's life. Level 7. Killer Vlogs Murders. On April 22, 2012, Peter Keller, a 41-year-old survivalist from North Bend, Washington, murdered his wife Lynette and daughter Kayleen, shooting them both in the head. He went on to execute their family pets, setting their home on fire to destroy the evidence and cover his tracks before disappearing into the wilderness. But Peter had long planned this. Over the course of 8 years, he had secretly constructed an elaborate 2-story underground bunker in the dense forests near Rattlesnake Ridge. His hidden fortress was meticulously designed and stockpiled with supplies, weapons, and ammunition. He was convinced that the apocalypse was around the corner and that it would be merciless and brutal on just about everybody. In his mind, the murders were actually acts of mercy. But law enforcement was on the hunt for him. Detectives pieced together clues from recovered computers, cell phone records, and even enhanced photographs found in the burned house. These leads, combined with old-fashioned detective work, eventually led them to the vicinity of Peter's hideout. Peter's bunker itself was a marvel of DIY engineering. Built 20 feet into a hillside, it featured log cabin walls, multiple levels, and was equipped with a generator, police scanner, and various survival gear to prepare himself for the eventual apocalypse. Now, as authorities closed in, a tense 22-hour standoff ensued. SWAT teams surrounded the bunker, eventually using explosives to breach its roof. On April 28, 2012, they entered to find Peter Keller dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But it wasn't until he had died that the police found the most disturbing piece of evidence yet, a video diary that Peter had recorded around 2 weeks before the murders. The video showed Peter casually discussing his plans to drop out of society and acknowledging the possibility of his own death, stating, "I can always shoot myself and I'm okay with that." Ultimately, everything that Peter said he would do, he went on to do. At no point did he ever hesitate on his plan. It's pretty clear that he always intended to do this. Whether or not he truly believed in the apocalypse, however, or just used it as an excuse, is unclear. Elaine Campione Tate. On October 2nd, 2006, Frances Elaine Campione was recording a video about her failed marriage. When she was 20 years old, Frances moved to Ontario, met Leo Campione, and married. Their relationship deteriorated, leading to a bitter divorce and custody battle. This video saw her aggressively expressing her hatred towards Leo, claiming that God was taking care of the children that they shared. The ominous words were intense, but the reality behind them was far, far worse.
After the 3 years of physical, emotional, and mental abuse that I endured tremendously by Leonardo Campione, and in the past year from Anna and Diego Campione, the mental and emotional abuse, which wouldn't stop, and I had CAS keep bringing these two people into my life over and over again when I kept telling them the amount of mental and emotional abuse it was causing my 3-year-old daughter Serena and I and Sophia. It was horrible and uncalled for. And I want justice to my family for what they've all done to us. I cried out for help. They should have charged him for the assaults he did to me, the assaults he did to my oldest daughter Serena, and they did nothing for us.
Their 2 young daughters, Serena and Sophia, no older than 3 years old, were both dead. Frances had drowned them in a bathtub of their apartment for no clear reason whatsoever. After the drowning, she had dressed the girls in pajamas, posed them on a bed, and attempted suicide herself, but she wasn't successful. And now she would have to seriously pay the price for the crimes she had committed. Frances was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Her trial lasted 7 weeks, during which her lawyer argued for a not guilty verdict by reason of insanity. The defense highlighted Frances's history of mental illness, including multiple stays in psychiatric wards, suicide attempts, and paranoid delusions. The argument, they said, was that this would always have happened. But the video evidence kept coming back, showing that Frances was psychologically there, very conscious that what she was doing was wrong, and done with the intent of hurting her ex-husband. On November 5th, 2010, a jury found Frances guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict indicated that despite her mental health issues, she was always aware that murder was wrong. Frances was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 25 years before parole eligibility. Frances filed against her convictions, but in 2015, some of these were denied by the Ontario Court of Appeal. In a controversial move, Judge Alfred Stong, who presided over the trial, made comments after the verdict suggesting that if he had the power, he would have overturned the jury's decision. He implied that Frances's actions were a result of the abuse she had suffered at the hands of her ex-husband. But for most people, Frances's actions were simply beyond forgiveness.